Today, you could say that the Panton Chair is almost annoyingly ubiquitous. In fact, it's probably this familiarity that makes it easy to overlook how interesting and contentious its history actually is. So yes, it is the first ever moulded plastic cantilevered chair, and it has claimed a well-earned space in the permanent collection of the Museum of Modern Art in New York. But let's talk about some of the more colourful parts of this story. Now, is it the revolutionary 1960s manufacturing conventions that were repeatedly stretched and pushed to breaking point that make it so interesting? Or is it its form and the complete disregard of the cultural and aesthetic norms of the time, especially in its birthplace of Scandinavia, that the designer just ignored to the point that the chair was labelled as vulgar? Or perhaps it's because it's just so unapologetically sensual, and that it clearly ruffled the feathers of the moral and social boundaries of what furniture should be, forever. So this chair was wrestled into being by Danish designer Werner Panton, a self-declared provocateur. So was he a genius, or was he an egoist and a show-off, intent on just burning bridges, chasing fame? In any case, it wasn't just the first chair that was made from a single piece of moulded plastic. It became known as a sculpture you could sit on. It was definitely a sex symbol disguised as seating, and it was most certainly a fluorescent middle finger to the austere legacy of Bauhaus modernism. So in the 1960s, when Scandinavian design was all about quiet craftsmanship, natural materials, functionalist restraint, you can see that Panton often just veered wildly in the opposite direction. In his words, he wanted synthetic to feel sensual. He wanted colour to feel surreal. And with the Panton Chair, he was one of the first to collapse the boundaries between furniture, pop art, and the overriding countercultural spirit of the time. Now, I'll admit, I used to dismiss this piece. I thought that the space-age curves felt overexposed, and it was a relic of retrofuturism that had just lost its bite over the years. But upon diving into its wild and tangled origin story for this channel, its repeated failures, its controversies, and its provocations, I've changed my mind, and I've come to see it for what it is. It's a mischievous, psychedelic problem child, and it is most certainly a design masterpiece. So, as mentioned, Werner Panton was not your typical Danish designer. In a country known for quiet, functional and beautiful minimalism, think Wagner, Jacobsen, the second of which who had actually been Panton's mentor, Panton was what is now referred to as a maximalist. He was drawn to pop art, psychedelia, and wanted to represent these things with the new era's possibilities in industrial materials. So bring forth his vision of the world's first one-piece cantilevered injection moulded plastic chair. You can see it curves beautifully like a wave. It balances all your weight on a single sweeping base. Doesn't need legs, doesn't need symmetry, doesn't need tradition. It was designed to stack incredibly, and it was able to be mass produced. You could hose it down and it most certainly turned heads. At the time, it came in colours that you'd expect with Panton's vision: bright orange, acid green, hot pink. So clearly, this was a chair that was designed to pop in avant-garde interiors, not to just sit in the polite living rooms of the day's design elite. So, it was dismissed as vulgar. Naturally, its stability was questioned. Joyfully, it was described as unserious by the design establishment of the time. And after all, it did defy everything that Scandinavian design was known for. It had no wood, it had no function-first minimalism, and it certainly wasn't subtle or polite. Now, this theatrical sideshow then faced the more serious problem of its production process. No one knew how to manufacture it. In fact, apparently 15 manufacturers rejected Panton's design. No one could figure out how to make it without joints, glue and expensive hand labour. The design diva, as the chair became spoken of, took the designer nearly a decade of relentless experimentation and rejection before it reached its final form. Now, it was 1967 when Panton finally did crack the code, and it was through teaming up with the German manufacturer Vitra that the chair was brought into production, and it was considered a breakthrough in Europe. Vitra used cold-pressed compression moulding, which had never been tried for a full chair before. Now by then, it had taken the designer nearly 10 years, countless prototypes and the timely development of a new plastic called Beta, just to get it this far. But even then, it was a nightmare to produce. It sagged, it scratched, it warped in heat, it then failed under everyday use, it aged terribly, and just generally looked shabby out in the real world. So poor Panton's vision, a sexy, sleek, single-piece cantilever chair made entirely of plastic, had just outrun the limits of 20th century materials. And so in the late 1970s, production quietly stopped. The piece did live on somewhat as a design icon, but it never really quite held its own. And then this half-baked reputation also came riddled with plagiarism accusations. So yes, while the chair is widely credited as being the world's first mass-produced single-piece plastic chair, the conceptual roots of the cantilevered legless form run much deeper and far murkier. Now, the earliest clear precedent is Gerrit Rietveld's zigzag chair from 1934, which is a radical Z-shaped form composed of flat wooden planes joined at sharp angles. No, yes, it wasn't plastic, and no, it wasn't quite a single material. But it was in principle a legless cantilever, and in many eyes, the ideological ancestor to the Panton Chair. Now fast forward to the early 1950s, the awkward truth is that Danish designers Gunnar Andersen and Paul Kjærholm, both central figures in the Danish art and design avant-garde, both independently explored similar formal ideas to Panton. In 1952 and 53, Andersen had developed a sculptural one-piece chair form intended to be cast in fiberglass or aluminium, I believe. Now, allegedly only a papier-mâché model was ever made. Now, around the same time, Paul Kjærholm, then a student at the School of Arts and Crafts in Copenhagen, was also experimenting with monolithic seat shells as well. But again, no prototypes have survived, and apparently none ever really did reach a functional state. In 1968, just 1 year after the Panton Chair entered serial production with Vitra, both Andersen and Kjærholm publicly accused Panton of plagiarising their earlier ideas. The implication that Panton had borrowed not just the form, but the very essence of their sculptural experiments without acknowledgement. So let's discuss this distinction. Now, while Andersen and Kjærholm contributed valuable conceptual seeds deserving of recognition, neither of them did translate those ideas into a technically viable production-ready object. So their work remains speculative, their work remains academic. Panton, on the other hand, did spend a decade in material trial and error, navigating all the manufacturing constraints, collaborating with the engineers at Vitra and Bayer, and repeatedly iterating towards a reproducible design. In other words, Panton industrialised what others merely imagined. And also, when you look at it, the cycle just keeps continuing. Just a few years later, Steen Ostergaard released the Cardo 290 chair. It was 68 or 69, I believe. Another one-piece moulded plastic design. Now this clearly rode the wave that Panton had made possible. So was this chair inspired? Was it derivative? Was it plagiarised? And if so, plagiarised from whom? These echoes and overlaps are part of what make the history of design so volatile and just so human. Accusations would follow Panton for years. Please let me know if there's more to these stories in the comments, or any more lost or unheralded creative intellectual property. Of course, no one wants their ideas or hard work to be stolen or miscredited. However, I will say it is clear that history tends to favour the ones who finish the race, not the ones who started. Now, more excitingly, there was the scandal. Most mid-century furniture, though still beautifully functional, still adhered to strict formality. Think Eames, Mies, Wagner, elegant but restrained. And then came Panton. The 1960s and 70s marked a really interesting cultural shift where furniture and design objects began to be openly sexualised. And the Panton Chair was one of the earliest and most iconic examples of this emerging zeitgeist. In 1970, British magazine Nova, known for its bold feminist editorial voice, published a photo series of a woman with a red Panton chair titled "How to Undress for Your Husband." The article was raw and provocative and instantly iconic. This now retro royalty poster series, featuring Amanda Lear, shot by renowned photographer Brian Duffy, wasn't just erotic. It reframed the chair as both object and symbol in a conversation about power, the form of everyday objects, and the female body. Now, Nova was not a tabloid magazine. From my understanding, it was a radical publication that explored women's sexuality, politics, and design with intellect and edge. And by placing the Panton Chair at the centre of such a visual statement, I feel it cemented the chair as an artefact of the era's sexual revolution. Now, yes, there were earlier hints of sexualised furniture. Some favourites: Corbusier's LC4 chaise, which is often called the relaxing machine, created a bit of a stir at the time, 1928, with its body cradling form. Dali's Mae West lips, overtly playing with the idea of surreal sexuality, this time seen as a clear cross between art and furniture. But our Panton Chair, mass-produced, mass-marketed, was what I consider to be a pioneer in bringing overt sensuality into everyday design at scale. This became a statement in body politics, challenging societal norms about modesty and sensuality, and just demanding political change. Some, of course, said it was sexist, others said it was brilliant. Either way, it cemented the Panton Chair as a design icon with a strong cultural voltage. However, for a time after its halt in production in the 1970s, the chair did fade into kitsch. It was too wild for serious interiors, and as discussed, it was just too fragile for daily use. It was seen in books, some galleries, but ultimately it was dismissed as a 60s relic. But then, as postmodernism gave way to nostalgia and design revivalism, the Panton Chair did make a comeback. This time 20 years later. Stronger, just as sexy, and finally it was durable. It was the late 1990s though, and this was unfortunately 2 years after Panton's death. But Vitro tried again. And with the help of new polypropylene technology, they finally made a version that worked. The Panton Chair Classic in rigid polyurethane foam, and the more affordable Panton Chair Standard in durable polypropylene. These are still in production today in various colours and sizes, and the chair has finally achieved the level of quality that the designer aspired to all along. So while it became unavailable for decades, leading to myths about it being too outrageous, too vulgar, unstable, dangerous, or possibly a direct plagiarised idea, the reality is that its disappearance is more about the limitations of 1960s plastics. Our rebellious prototype could now take its rightful claim as a true design icon. It's found in museums, design hotels, and design-savvy homes. Now today, the Panton Chair is everywhere. Its ubiquity almost works against it. It's easy to forget that this object was once one that faced threats upon every turn of its creation. But upon knowing this story, I can see that the chair still carries a charge, and you just have to look and you'll find it. Perhaps the chair's most famous appearance was in January 1995, when it appeared on the cover of the British edition of Vogue. The photography by Nick Knight also included a naked Kate Moss, reviving the chair as a central provocation, as seen by Amanda Lear and Brian Duffy, expressing the design as cradling a human body like a sculpture. When researching this episode, I saw one of my favourite Australian fashion labels, Charcoal Clothing, using the white Panton Chair as a co-star in one of their campaigns. You can see the sculptural pose of the model echoes the S-curve, transforming the chair back again into something sensual, again a quality I believe the designer had always dreamed of. Elsewhere, other designers are also reclaiming it. In Prague, the design studio Cubus replaced traditional pews in a historic Baroque church with rows of white Panton chairs, a stark and futuristic juxtaposition. In every case, the chair adapts. It plays along. It never disappears. The chair that no one wanted now sits in the Museum of Modern Art. And Bernard Panton? Well, he never did apologise for asking the future to arrive too early.